never thought I would write these words. For years, I tried to bury them, to tell myself that silence was safer than memory. But silence only made the voices louder. I was 20 years old when I first set foot in Vietnam, a boy in a uniform pretending to be a soldier. They told us we were there to fight communism, to protect freedom, to do our duty. What I found instead was a war that blurred every line I thought I understood, and a day that has haunted me ever since. My name is David Miller, a private first class in Charlie Company, 1st Battalion, 11th Infantry Brigade, 23rd Infantry Division of the U.S. Army. I was born in a small town along the Mississippi River in the American South. Before enlisting, I worked as a mechanic's assistant in my father's garage, living a quiet life that rarely took me beyond the borders of my hometown. At 20, I joined the Army, not out of patriotism, not out of hatred for anyone, but simply because I thought it would be a ticket out of that dull little town, a way to see the world. But the world I saw on March 16th, 1968, was hell. I remember the night before that day vividly. The sea wind from Chu Lai blew cold through the thin canvas of our tents. Inside the cramped barracks, the heavy breathing of my comrades blended with the constant churring of insects outside. We were called to an emergency briefing, and everyone assumed tomorrow would be another search and destroy mission. Captain Medina stood in front of the map, his face washed pale under the dim yellow light, his shadow stretching long across the tent wall. He pointed to a small dot labeled Pinkville, the name we used for the My Lai hamlet. Medina spoke firmly. "This is a Viet Cong stronghold. Tomorrow morning we're going in to clean it out. The civilians will be gone to market by 7. Anyone left behind is VC or helping them. Don't hesitate." Someone asked, "What about women and children, sir?" Medina paused for a second, then said coldly, "If they're still there, they're not civilians." I'm not sure what chilled me more, his words or the silent acceptance in that room. No one objected. No one dared. The next morning, the sky was still gray when we loaded up on ammunition, grenades, water, and boarded the helicopters. I sat with my back pressed against the rattling metal wall, the rotor wash whipping cold air across my face. I tried to imagine a battle like the training manuals described. Enemies behind trenches, us charging through gunfire. But when we landed on the edge of My Lai, there was none of that. Just rice paddies wet with dew, a few buffalo chewing straw, a handful of farmers bent low in the fields. No gunfire, no return fire, no trace of war except for us. Lieutenant Callie led the first platoon into the village. I followed behind. An old man stepped out of his hut, empty-handed, squinting against the sun. A soldier up front fired, and the old man crumpled like a sack of grain. I froze, clutching my M16, heart pounding. Women screamed from the thatched houses. Then more shots cracked out, as if no order was needed. Our men stormed through homes, dragging people out, tossing grenades into bunkers, firing at anyone who ran. I saw a mother clutching her child, sobbing, her hands raised. They herded her with others, all women and children, to a ditch. Someone whispered, "Are we really shooting women too?" Callie didn't even turn around. He just jerked his head. "Orders are to clean it out." Then the gunfire ripped. Bodies fell like rag dolls, piling on top of each other. I turned away, swallowing hard, my throat dry and raw. Gunfire crackled non-stop. Houses burned, black smoke rising to blot out the midday sun. Cries and screams, then silence. The stench of charred wood mingled with the sharp metallic smell of blood, clinging to everything. I stepped over a collapsed hut. Inside lay 3 children, motionless, eyes wide open, staring at nothing. I can't forget those eyes. For a moment, I wished someone, anyone, would give the order to stop. I wished for any reason, any excuse not to do this. But no one spoke. We found no weapons, no bunkers, no enemy resistance. Only villagers, unarmed, ununiformed. And yet we kept going. Some men smashed wells, slaughtered livestock, burned granaries. Callie said it was to cut off VC supplies. But watching it, I couldn't convince myself this was war. It was slaughter. By noon, when the artillery stopped and there was no one left to shoot, we were told to pull out. I glanced back. The village was nothing but black smoke columns and fields scattered with bodies. No birdsong, no crowing roosters. Only the wind whispering through shattered thatch and the chilling silence of death. That night, I lay in the tent, staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. The official report would say we killed over 100 Viet Cong, with 0 American casualties. But I know, and I will never forget, they were farmers, they were women, they were children who hadn't yet learned to read, and we turned their village into hell. I didn't kill anyone, but I was there, and that will haunt me for the rest of my life. It's been over a year since that morning in My Lai, but the smell of burnt thatch and blood still lingers in my mind like it never left. For months after we left Vietnam, I tried to convince myself it had all been some grotesque misunderstanding, that the women and children were somehow part of it, that we had done what was necessary, that war makes monsters of everyone, and I was just a witness swept along by the tide. But now the newspapers have torn that lie apart. It started with whispers, letters passed between veterans, rumors that someone had spoken. Then it hit the headlines. Massacre at My Lai. The words leapt off the front page, black and sharp as a bullet. Seymour Hersh's articles laid everything bare. Photographs followed, the ones Haberly had taken that day, of the bodies in the ditch, of children piled like broken dolls, their tiny limbs twisted. I saw the pictures, and my hands began to shake. I had been there. I remembered the ditch. I remembered the flies buzzing over the bodies, the way the mud soaked up the blood until it turned black. I remembered turning my head away as the rifles cracked. And now the whole world sees what I saw. At first, I thought I'd feel relieved, as if someone had finally spoken the truth out loud, freed me from the secret. But instead, it felt like my insides collapsed. I hadn't pulled the trigger, yet I felt complicit. I had watched. I had done nothing. That silence, that paralysis, made me part of it all. The army is trying to contain the fire. They've put Lieutenant Callie on trial. Only him, just one man, as if one man alone killed over 500 people. Medina walks free. Most of the others too. We all go about our lives, pretending we didn't walk through a village and leave it silent forever. And here I am, back in Mississippi, back in my father's garage, the smell of oil and iron thick in the air. Everyone here says, "Welcome home," and smiles and shakes my hand. They talk about victory, about sacrifice. They don't know. They don't want to know. Sometimes, when I close my eyes, I hear the rotor blades again. I smell smoke. I see the girl in the ditch with her hands raised, eyes wide, mouth open, but no sound. I see her fall. I wake up gasping. I think about writing to Hirsch. I think about confessing, about saying, I was there, I didn't stop it, I am sorry. But I don't know if anyone would listen. I don't know if I deserve to be heard. So, I write here. In this notebook, no one else will read. Maybe that's all I can do. Maybe this is the only way to carry the ghosts without letting them consume me. I didn't kill anyone, but I was there. And some nights, that feels worse. I am old now. My hair has turned silver. My hands tremble, and my steps have grown unsteady. But one weight has stayed with me all my life. The memory of March 16th, 1968, at My Lai. For decades I carried the guilt, not because I pulled the trigger. I didn't, but because I was there, because I saw it all and stayed silent. I let it happen before my eyes. Night after night, I woke to the sound of screaming, the smell of smoke, the eyes of terrified children. My entire life has been a prison built out of that day. One day, I decided to go back to Vietnam. The long flight carried me back to the land I once walked as an invader. In Quang Ngai, I followed the road to the Sun My Memorial. Inside the museum, I saw the photographs, the relics, the stories written in Vietnamese and English. Faces of children, burned houses, mass graves. The truth was laid bare. The truth I had carried in silence for over 30 years. I stood there for a long time, my eyes stinging, my heart heavy. This was the horror my army had brought here. This was the shadow I had never escaped. But what broke me most was not the memory. It was the kindness. The people of My Lai welcomed me with gentle smiles. The elders shook my hand. Women offered me tea. Children waved at me, laughing. Not a word of anger, not a glance of hatred. I had expected rejection, contempt. Instead, I was met with warmth. These people had chosen to lay down hatred and walk toward the future. In their forgiveness, I saw greatness, a strength I had never understood before. They taught me that forgiveness is not forgetting. It is refusing to remain chained to the past. For the first time in over 30 years, I felt something lift inside me. I ate steaming bowls of pho in Hanoi, tasted spicy bun bo hu, sat by the Thu Bon River watching the sun sink into the water. I listened to folk songs, watched children play in the fields. Every moment in Vietnam was like medicine for a soul long wounded. I felt alive again. When I returned to America, I told my children and grandchildren about Vietnam, not just about the war, but about the people, their smiles, their food, their music, their resilience. I began to read about Vietnamese culture, to cook their dishes in my small kitchen, sometimes even brewing myself a strong, bitter cup of coffee, the way the Vietnamese do. I once thought my life would end in darkness, buried beneath guilt. But in the very place where I once witnessed so much death, I found peace. The Vietnamese people gave me back something I thought I had lost forever: my faith in humanity, in forgiveness. Now when I close my eyes, I no longer see the ditch, no longer hear the cries. Instead, I see green rice fields. I hear laughter. I see life continuing. And at last, after more than 3 decades, I can breathe deeply and let the ghosts go.